Welcome back to Simply Legal. We have a very special guest on the channel. I bet you've seen me with him on different videos, on WhatsApp, on TikTok, and the rest. Here with me I have the old man of the clan, Mr. Andrew Mwenda, and he's here to give us his special perspective on politics, the legal regime of Uganda, and the history of how things have been running from 1962 up to now.
My grandson's fans and followers on YouTube, I am very glad to give you all the trash that is in my head. I want to offload it onto you.
Okay. Yes, Grandpa. The first question I'll ask you is, what was a political legal regime before the time of President Museveni? So we can just fast forward from 1962 up to 1985.
I think there are about three fundamental differences between the 1967 constitution and the 1995 constitution. So this is how Uganda's political regime has evolved. We had the 1962 independence constitution. That constitution created a semi-federal system of government. Buganda, as a region, was under a federal relationship with the rest of Uganda. But then the kingdoms of Toro, Bunyoro, Ankole, and the territory of Busoga had a semi-federal relationship with the government. Then the rest of the country was in a unitary arrangement with the central government, which also should show you that Uganda was the negotiations at Westminster had created a hodgepodge, a highly confusing and confused system. Now, that system was overthrown in 1966 when Obote abolished the 1962 constitution, but it just, the only thing that the 1966 constitution did was to fuse the power of the president and the prime minister. Then in 1967, Obote introduced the Republican Constitution, which had the three key issues. One, the president would be elected by parliament. So people would go into elections as political parties, exactly the way you see the system in South Africa. You know, in South Africa, they don't elect the president directly.
Oh, I didn't know.
Even in Rwanda, they don't elect the president directly. So what do is parties compete as political parties. You go and vote for a political party. No, in Rwanda, they vote for a president. But in South Africa, you vote for a political party. If ANC wins, now, when they're entering elections, you must declare as a political party, this is our presidential candidate. And all members of parliament contesting also declare that I'm running on the political party called the NUP, and my presidential candidate is Bobby Wine. You see, so that was the 67 constitution. Then when parliament, the party that wins a majority in parliament does not sit directly to elect the president, no. Because the president was elected indirectly. You had to endorse the party presidential candidate, you as an MP. So you could not go to parliament now and say I'm voting for somebody else. So your vote was already tied.
Okay, I
understand. That was one aspect of the constitution. The second aspect of that constitution was it abolished kingdoms and made Uganda a republic. The third aspect of the constitution, it created the foundation for the introduction of the Preventive Detention Act, which really said that if government suspects you of likely to cause a crime, it could have you arrested in a preventive way.
It's kind of like preventative arrest, what we have currently.
The current constitution, I think, bans preventive detention. But at that time, government could arrest you in a preventive measure and hold you without charge for an indefinite period of time. Now, when Amin came in, he abolished most parts of the constitution and decided to rule by decree. So that's the second legal regime from that. So Obote is overthrown on 25th January 1975, and Amin becomes the president, and Amin decides that he will rule by decree. The constitution is suspended. When Amin is overthrown in 1979, the 67 constitution is restored, but many parts of it are again dismissed. Remember, the system of electing a president could not happen. So there was a legal notice number 1 of 1979, which legalized UNLF, and how because the president had been elected in Tanzania by a small group of exilees, Yusuf Lule. So, but the rest of the other parts of the constitution were brought back into force. So that's why you should read the case of Kaira Semogere versus Dan Nabudere, Omonyo Jok, Edward Rugumayo, and Professor Sempebwa, and 8 others. That comes because Kaira and Semogere go to court challenging the removal of Lule. And in their defense, they say the system of removing a president under the 1967 constitution was not followed, meaning the constitution had been brought back into force. They had only suspended those sections of the constitution on the election of the president.
Yes. But
the UNLF guys in that case actually argue, saying that look, the Lule had been elected as the chief executive of UNLF. When they met at State House, they removed him as leader of UNLF. His position as president was incumbent upon his position as leader of UNLF, and therefore his position as president also became a nullity. But of course, actually the court said that was wrong. The court said Lule was not properly removed or something like that, but the court made the ruling when matters had been overtaken by events, because when Lule was removed, he was replaced by Benaisa. Yes. Then Benaisa was overthrown in the military coup led by Museveni and Oito Joka and Paulo Mwanga. So it is under this military coup that the court delivers the judgment when the government and which they are contesting itself had been overthrown. So, but the court seemed to say that that was a political decision, not a legal decision. The court cannot remove a government.
Yes.
The court cannot remove a government because that had been elected. So that is the legal regime under UNLF. Now, when Obote comes back in May 1980, and the elections are held under a multi-party system of government, the 1967 constitution is restored 100%. So the elections are conducted under the 67 constitution, and the government subsequently governs under the 1967 constitution, which was overthrown on 27th July 1985 by Tito Okello, and Tito Okello is overthrown by Museveni. Museveni restores the 67 constitution except the provisions for electing a president. That's legal notice number 1 of 1986.
Wow.
So that system continues with minor amendments until 1995, October 9th, when we launch the current constitution.
Wow.
Now, what are the differences between the 67 constitution and the current constitution? The major ones.
I was actually going to bring that question.
Yes. The first is it introduces a presidential system where the president would be elected directly by the population. Remember, previously he was indirectly elected, now he's directly elected. That's one. Two, it entrenches some provisions, I can't remember which ones, that make preventive detention impossible. For example, the Constitution says you can only be arrested for 48 hours. The government may violate it, but the Constitution says if you're arrested, you must be charged within 48 hours. That is to say you cannot be arrested indefinitely. Those days you could be detained indefinitely.
Especially in the period of Idi Amin.
Yes. The third element, it legalizes, although it maintains the republic, it legalizes the traditional and cultural leaders. Although they had passed an amendment to restore the Kabak of Buganda and then the other kingdoms of Tora and the Ankol and the Bunyoro started restoring themselves, but now it constitutionalizes and entrenches these cultural institutions and they become constitutional. What is the fourth thing? Perhaps another one is to say that power belongs to the people, because and it gives supreme control over things like land to people. That's why right now government cannot, it has power to forcefully take over your land, but it must fully compensate you. Where there is willing buyer and willing seller, you can only be expropriated upon a price you have agreed to. Yes, I think those are the most important changes.
And actually, in accordance, let me just cut you. In accordance with that, we call that compulsory land acquisition.
Yes.
Especially when government wants a certain project in your land.
Although it's compulsory land acquisition, even that compulsoriness is restricted by many things. Because it also says, you know why the compulsoriness is reduced significantly?
Why?
Because you have to be compensated at the price of your agreement for government to take the land. One of the reasons, there are some roads in Uganda where the cost of compensating claimants exceeds the cost of the road.
Oh.
There are also roads in Uganda where, because claimants have refused to be compensated, when a contractor is already on site, prolongation costs exceed the cost of the road. You know what prolongation costs are?
No, I'm not.
In contract law, in contracts of law regarding construction of roads, if government hires you to build a road and you agree that you'll finish in 2 years, the government of Uganda has obligations through UNRA it must meet. For example, it must provide you access, land access. You get it?
Yes, I get it.
If it fails to provide for you land access and it is in a court battling owners of land, and yet you have brought your staff and equipment, you are on site, you are there for 2 years, and yet you don't have the land to construct, the road construction date is prolonged. So you are compensated for every single day your machines and workers are on site. You are paid because there are daily rates that are in the contract. So you are paid what they call prolongation cost, even if you have done zero work. But as long as you have mobilized your equipment and your staff and they're on site, every week they have to write down the equipment you have, the one that is functional, and you are paid a daily rate for them. So sometimes because of these delays of a compensation, the cost of prolongation costs can exceed the cost of the actual road.
Yes.
And I have these examples. Two, if you as a contractor fail to achieve the work under the terms, government provided you the land and everything, but you do not have enough equipment, they charge you what they call liquidated damages. Government withholds money. You build a finished road, but they withhold a lot of your pay as a penalty. So in Uganda, prolongation costs are a big problem because whether it is in building power transmission lines, roads, railways, it's a disaster. So I think that Ugandans have been so empowered by the 95 Constitution, even though they complain that they have been disempowered, and they wonder. I am now convinced that the more freedom you give to people, the less free they feel. Yes.
It brings me to my next question. Grandpa, we have in law what's called independence of the judiciary under Article 126 of the Constitution. When you look at what used to happen in the government of Obote and Idi Amin, there was no independence of the judiciary. I keep telling people and the viewers of Simply Legal that they are lucky as Ugandans to have an independent judiciary. So maybe you could give us a comment on that.
I think you are wrong on the government of Milton Obote. When Obote was Prime Minister and President between 62 and 71, the judiciary in Uganda was very, very independent, perhaps more independent than now. You may wish to know that by 1971, when Amin took over, there was not a single Ugandan judge on the bench. Did you know that?
I didn't know.
No, there was no. They were all white. They were British, except the chief justice was called Udo Udoma. Sir Udo Udoma was from Nigeria. He was the only Ugandan. And I can tell you, Obote could not call these Muzungu and bulldoze them around. So the judiciary was entirely independent. Entirely independent. It is under Idi Amin, there could not be an independent judiciary because Amin did not respect any law. He ran roughshod over people's rights in anything. In the 1980s, there was a fairly independent judiciary, but the state in Uganda has largely collapsed. And when Museveni came in, I think Museveni has, if there is any contribution I can clap for him for, it is the independence of the judiciary. The opposition don't see it. You know, Museveni has hardly won cases in court, except election petitions. If you talk of, I as a journalist have been to court, up to Supreme Court on many cases, I have always won. The opposition parties have gone to court on so many cases and they have always won. Ugandans who have sought protection over the courts have always won. You see, in 2006, 2005, Besigye was arrested. And Museveni tried to deny him bail. The courts gave him bail. So Museveni went and charged Besigye in a court martial. A military court martial where Museveni has 100% control. I admit the court martial is not independent. That's
I remember reading that case.
Yes. So the court martial there cannot rule on anything. That's Museveni's court. It's a kangaroo court where Museveni's wishes have whim. But I can tell you the courts of Uganda released Besigye although Museveni did not want it. And Museveni had sent a group of people to rearrest Besigye outside the court. This is January 2006. But the people of Uganda, masses surrounded the court and rescued Besigye from there. There was a squad there of the army to arrest him, but when they made the judgment, the crowd was so big. If you attempt to arrest him, there will be a bloodbath. That's how Besigye was released by two things: the power and independence of the Ugandan courts, and the popular opinion on the street to defend that power. You see, a constitution, I should tell you, my grandson and those listening, is really a piece of paper. A constitution to be effective must be self-reinforcing. There must be sufficient incentives on the part of government to honor what is written there, and sufficient threats that should it dare try to alter any part of that constitution, there will be such resistance that the government will be toppled or there will be disaster. If that kind of political balance between the positive incentives to uphold it and the reprisals if you try to violate it do not exist, that constitution will not stand. It can remain in paper and be violated, or it will be amended. So when Museveni removed age limits and term limits, it's simply because the political balance was in his favor.
Yes.
Because constitutions are political documents, so they can stand and fall through political decisions. You cannot say that a constitution or any law can be above politics. Politics is supreme.
Over the law.
Yes, law is a creature of the state and its politics. So law cannot be above the state. The state must agree. So what is it that ensures that the law is effectively respected? I have told you. It's two things, that there must be sufficient political capacity to force those in the state to honor it. There must also be sufficient positive incentive that if you honor it, you are rewarded, and should you violate it, there will be some evil that will be visited onto you or upon you. You get it? Yes. And you cannot overcome that evil. So in this case, Besigye's bail application, which was granted by a very strong court, could have collapsed because the Museveni group had capacity to arrest him, but the popular masses of Uganda, off the street, surrounded the court and forced a decision, and Besigye regained his freedom. So there I can tell you that is what politics, if in effect, is. So Besigye was charged with rape, he was charged with terrorism, he was charged with treason. The court released him. Museveni and Besigye and Bobby Wine every day get arrested, every day get bail. I'm sure Museveni wanted them to stay in jail forever, if it could work for him that way. So the fact that all Museveni's attempts to arrest opposition politicians and keep them in jail for more than 2-3 days have failed, and he can only buy time running around, taking them to Karamoja or things like that. He has run around, but he has bought time for 2 weeks maximum. By and large, the courts of Uganda have finally prevailed and given them, and Museveni has respected those decisions because he recognizes that the people of Uganda will not tolerate him acting like Idi Amin. It is conscious in his mind. So we have achieved a certain degree of political maturity, and a certain which leads to the respect of the law, but also the appointment of judges in Uganda. Museveni saying that homosexuality law, we went to court, the court threw it out.
Yes.
You get it? So if we were to count, you are a legal student, a student of legal whatever, you go and study how many petitions by the opposition and by newspapers and journalists have gone to court. What percentage has Museveni won? I don't think it is even 10%. Is that not an independent judiciary? If the judiciary is not independent, why doesn't the government win every case?
Government is always losing.
I'm telling you, even on corruption, the corrupt can bribe judges and be acquitted. Even murderers have been acquitted in this country. So I am very, very proud of the Ugandan courts. I am very proud of the Ugandan judges. There are a few judges who may be corrupt. There are judges who may be cowardly. There will be a few. The judiciary of Uganda as a whole, I can say without fear of contradiction, is very independent, and I'm very proud of our judges. I'm very proud of the judiciary. I live in this country happily knowing that I am protected by the justice system.
The people would want to, the viewers would want to know about your case when you are put together with, I think,
Charles Onyango.
Yeah, Charles Onyango.
Well, me and Charles Obo were arrested and charged with publication of false news. We challenged it in the Constitutional Court and also went to Supreme Court and won, because the government was saying what we had written was false. And the court said, look, it is very difficult to know what is truth and what is falsehood. In many cases, time may prove the other person right. So we cannot stifle the freedom of the media to publish information on the basis that by criminalizing what we are calling false information, which may turn out to be true. And I know why the justices did that. In 1997, I published a story that a plane had gone missing in Congo, and Colonel Mwenda was on board. So the Minister of Defense at the time, called Minister of State for Defense, later became Deputy Chief Justice, Stephen Kahuma, came to the press and addressed a press conference and said, Mwenda told lies. 2 days later, it turned out that I was correct. That the plane had actually gone missing, and there was UPDF Colonel on board and other people. Then a few days later, about 5 days later, in the monitor which I was working with, I published a story. I wrote a story saying the pilot and 3 others had died. Jet Mwenda and 3 others were missing, and 3 people had been rescued. 4 dead, 3 missing, 3 rescued. And known to us, the Minister of Defense, the same Stephen Kahuma, a good man, called the press conference, went on TV, primetime news, and announced that everybody had been rescued. So the next day, New Vision ran a headline: everybody rescued, independent, pilot and 3 others dead, 3 rescued, 3 missing. So there are 2 competing versions. Then, as the day followed, it turned out that I was right, the minister was wrong. So don't think that it was absent in the minds of the judges, that information today the government may claim to be false may be true tomorrow. And therefore we cannot criminalize that. Yes, And many Ugandans misunderstand that ruling. In fact, the moment the Supreme Court gave us that ruling, that judgment, not ruling, that judgment, I developed greater responsibility. Therefore, I must always endeavor to be as truthful as possible because they have protected my right to freedom of information. I should not abuse it by everyday writing lies, knowing that the future Supreme Court may reinstate that law. You see, if you abuse and journalists and the other people on social media, you see our freedom also comes with a responsibility. You have a freedom for free expression. But I don't think you should abuse it by acting like this lady, Stella Nyanzi, or Kakwenza, and going into personal insults of leaders. Because leaders are human beings like us. Stella Nyanzi wrote about the first lady, and I thought if she was my mother, I could have taken the law into my own hands and gone and shot her. So if me, at a very private level, I could feel such anger if I put my mother in the first lady's shoes, and I felt the anger, I could go and shoot her because the state will not give me that justice. Therefore, what if I am the one with the power of the state? And what I think that Museveni is a very kind and tolerant man, honestly, because I don't know whether any of these politicians who oppose him, if they had the power he has to control the army, the police and the prisons, even to control life and death, would tolerate things that are said against him. And I'm one of his biggest critics. Every day I criticize him, and yet I still have tea with him. You see, so I find him a very fatherly, tolerant person. And I think deep inside his soul, Museveni has what I would call liberal democratic convictions that are so deeply rooted in him. And if there is tolerance of free speech in Uganda, a lot of it has also to do with his personal character. Another part of it has to do with the complexity and diversity of Ugandan society. You cannot tie the busy tongue of Uganda where rumor and gossip are essential to our democratic life.
How do you see the political legal regime currently?
This is what I'm saying. I think that I am comfortable. You see, Uganda is, the Ugandan political system is a meeting ground of contradictory movements. If you look at the many aspects, statutory aspects of the law, like the Public Order Management Act, if you look at the law of, law of sedition, I went to Supreme Court and they threw it out actually, in the Constitutional Court. But there are many laws on the Ugandan statute books that are an affront to liberal democratic values. But if you look at the overall body of our legal regime, which is the Constitution, which is the primary law, it is a fairly liberal democratic document. So we can continue to fight these small laws in the Constitutional Court and the courts of law. That is one aspect. The other aspect is that in spite of these very bad laws, in terms of political practice, there is greater tolerance of freedom of expression. If you are a foreigner, you come into Uganda and you listen to television, radio stations, you watch television, you read newspapers, you would clearly see that there is a sufficient space for democratic expression, at least even more than I find in Europe and in North America. In fact, I think if there is no legal regime restraining freedom of expression, and it is there in the Western world, there has evolved what I would call political correctness, that is stifles political debate. In the West, there are very many things you cannot say because you have to be politically correct. If you speak anything outside of what is accepted political discourse, your television station will fire you. And if your television station does not, certain groups will organize and threaten advertisers who may pull advertising revenue, and the media house will cave in. So freedom of expression in the West is really, really heavily constrained. People don't understand that.
Are you serious?
Oh, so much.
But
you watch CNN right now. Do you see views that are pro-Putin on CNN? Why do you think everybody who goes there, every news item is a reflection of the US foreign policy? The State Department's policy and the Pentagon's policy and the White House policy is also, the American journalist is a spokesperson of the State Department, the Pentagon, and the White House. Why? We'll watch British media, watch all European media. Why are they all singing the same song? How can it be in such a diverse society as America and Europe that there is one view? One.
About Putin.
It is only on minor residual spaces like YouTube. You can find some interview of John Miyashima saying, no, we are the ones who are in the wrong as America. We have caused this situation. Why is it not a view that is propagated to CNN? Look, there are more African Americans in jail in America today, African Americans, than are in college. It's the richest country in the world. There are more African Americans in jail today than were enslaved in 1865. Are you aware?
Yes, I'm aware.
Why is that? Such an affront on one particular race. The United States committed a genocide against Native Americans. Right now, they are second-class citizens of America. They live in native reserves. Do you know that concentration camps like those of the Nazis? After they were genocided and all killed, the few that remained were pushed into reserves because their land was expropriated by the white colonialists who came there to colonize that land.
Actually,
why is that not part of American history and American discussion to say our state was built on slave labor of the black population and genocide of the Native Americans whose land we forcefully took away without paying them. And for us, we are settlers who came, and this is not our original land, we just forcefully took it through genocide. Why is not a discourse? Because if you try to create a political platform or a media channel that focuses on things like that, I can tell you it will not last a week. So this idea that there is freedom of speech in the West is a myth. Yes, there's freedom of speech in as long as what you say is in conformity with what the powers that be. And this power in America is diverse. You know, it's not centralized in one person. It's the power embedded in the research institutions of America, in the universities, in the business, in corporate America, and in the different social and civic associations that they have.
Yes.
All of them tend to reinforce a particular narrative about who they are and what they want to do in the world. I can tell you Uganda is a much fairer society
than the US.
Than the US. Maybe we can compete with Sweden. We, in our extreme poverty, we try to do so much on so small a budget for our people. You get it? In America, I can tell you in one day, they will increase the budget of the Pentagon to fight wars where Americans didn't benefit nothing except the arms industry. They will pass 160 billion. Supplementary budget for the Pentagon. That country cannot even pass 30 billion to provide medical insurance to its poorest citizens. It can't. 30. But they will pass a tax cut for the wealthy worth 2 trillion. They will pass it in 2 days. What are you talking about? Do you know that 1% of the richest Americans they earn about 40% of total income and own about 55%, 60% of all the wealth. The top 1%, they own 60% of the wealth. Yes. And the bottom 50% earn 12% of American income. The bottom 50% of Americans survive on 12% of that country's income. I mean, what are you talking about?
But in America, in Obama's government, he kept screaming Obamacare, Obamacare.
Obamacare was even an adulterated version of what any country can do. Of course, I can be sympathetic to America. Its racial and ethnic diversity makes it difficult to achieve a consensus around welfare because many white elites, the poorest people in America are migrants, like there are black people and Hispanic migrants there. So if you create a large-scale welfare program, the disproportionate number of beneficiaries will tend to be these ethnic minorities. So many white people feel, why should we pay taxes to
minority groups
to help these blacks and Hispanics? They are not our brothers, our cousins. They see them as different, the other. But if you go to a country like Sweden, why their social welfare programs work well is because 95% or 99% of the population are Swedish. They see each other as the same. Sameness tends to create sympathy. Oh, he's our brother, he's my cousin, he's whatever it is one of us. So we can have welfare to help them. But in America, they see them, you're not one of us. Why should we sacrifice our hard-earned money through because of that? Of course, poor whites are the biggest losers in this. And they vote for the Republican, all these programs of welfare. And even the Democrats are not any different from the Republicans. America is a one-party state. That party has 2 factions. One calls itself Democratic, another one Republican. They can change musical chairs, but they don't change the music.
Oh, I didn't know that. I actually thought there were 2 different, Republican and Democrat.
What is the difference between them? Tell me. The Democrats are in power, they will hate Cuba. The Republicans come, they will hate Cuba. There may be differences in degree or detail. Whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Iran. Have you ever seen change in the relationship between America and any country is not based on government?
Political party.
Even domestic programs. Whether it's to bail out the rich, when the big rich make profit, it's privatized. Profits are private. When they make losses, the taxpayer bails them out. Whether it's a Republican or Democratic administration, the rich always have their way because the rich are the ones who fund the elections. Congress is an arm of the rich. Look, Congress in America has about 500 members, about 535 members. There are about 3,500 lobbyists. So for every congressman, there are about 6 lobbyists. The lobbyists are hired by who? Powerful interest groups. The IT industry, the arms industry, big pharma. You know, the pharmaceutical industry is so powerful. The oil lobby, powerful. So these lobbies have money. They're the ones who fund all these parliamentary elections for senators and members of the House of Representatives.
Congressmen.
Yes, we know in America they have two parliaments, the Senate and House of Representatives. The two combined are called Congress. So Congress, even a senator is a congressman.
Oh.
So members of the House and members of the Senate are all members of Congress because Congress is a combination of the two. So now, those people are on the payroll of not the pharmaceutical industry, big corporations. Whether it's the IT industry, take Amazon, Google, Apple, Facebook. Whether you take the oil industry, you can talk of ExxonMobil, Shell, or whatever it is. These are big oil companies. The arms industry. Why do you think every American president has fought a war and bombed some innocent country? Why? Because the arms industry, its biggest client is the US government. If the US government does not buy arms, they don't make money. So they will always lobby the government to get taxpayers' money. And do you know America's military budget is larger than the combined budgets of all the rest of the world? You can get China, Russia, Britain, every country in the world. The American budget of defense is larger than the defense budgets of the rest of the world combined. I mean,
they invest so heavily in the arms industry.
And then they have to get an outlet for that arms industry. That's why they boom. What do Americans benefit? They went to Afghanistan and Iraq and spent more than 3-4 trillion. In fact, they say in the long term, if you look at the pension liabilities, the cost of these wars America has been fighting in the last 20 years, the cost to the American taxpayer is going to be 10 trillion. How can any democratic country? In America, people are living on the street. In the city of Los Angeles alone, there are 55,000 homeless people.
Oh my God.
And you are spending 10 trillion on meaningless wars that promotes democracy in Libya, and then you leave Libya in a mess. To promote democracy in Afghanistan and Yemen, and all of them are facing state collapse.
Barren wastelands.
Yes, and you say that Americans are so stupid to vote for a government like that. No wonder most Americans don't even show up to vote. At any one time, a president in America is elected by 32% of the population, of the registered voters. Anyway, but I want to come to the other main point. I think that as Africans, we need to develop pride in who we are, what we are, and develop independent thinking of what we want. The rich countries of the Western world, the only thing they're better than us is that they have more money and wealth than us. But I don't think that the Kiamlesere in my village, that very poor man, who cannot feed his children and dress them better, has worse values than Sudir, who is so rich. In fact, he may be much more morally upright, more caring of his children than Sudir, simply he doesn't have the money. That's the state of Uganda, just doesn't have the money. If you get our total budget divided by the total population, it is just $250 per person per year this financial year, $250. If you do that for the United States, it is $32,000. $32,000 per person per year. Surely, if I'm going to spend $200 and I'm going to spend $30,000, the outcomes, even if I wasted half of my $30,000, I will still perform better than you. Even if I wasted 70%, I will still perform more than you. Don't even forget that an average American is anyway, most of these Americans are well off anyway. So they can take care of themselves. So most Ugandans are not well off, so they can't take care of themselves.
Viewers, thank you so much for joining us. Today, I hosted the old man of the clan, Mr. Andrew Mwenda, giving us his perspective on the political legal regime in Uganda before the coming to force of the constitution, the current. I'll just have one last question and you answer briefly. Where do you see the political legal regime of Uganda moving forward?
I have no idea. You see, the future of Uganda is not cast in iron and steel. Uganda is like a fork. You know a fork?
Yes.
We have many paths we can take. Where Uganda is going to go from today is dependent on the series of decisions and the political struggles that we will engage in. So our future is, so I can create scenarios. And I think that the best case scenario I see is that either Museveni grows so old and retires or dies in office, and most likely I suspect there will be a family succession, whether to General Salim Saleh or General Mohozi, because people in NRM will prefer continuity. At the same time, they want change, but they also want continuity. And the best guarantor of that continuity may be a family succession. Now, of course, the opposition will be very hostile to this idea. And the outcome of that process, what we are going to see, and I think Museveni may have an upper hand, the opposition in Uganda too disorganized and radicalized to win over many Ugandans who are despondent. That's why voter turnout has been declining. declining. In the last election, only 58% of the total registered voters showed up to vote. I think Museveni got 38% of those. The Bobi Wine got about 20%, and the majority, like me, who didn't vote, we constitute 42%. So really, the president should be us, the 42%, who refused to participate in that circus.
Okay. Thank you so much. Is there anything more you'd like to say to the viewers?
Only to say, viewers, thank you so much. If you have listened till the end, thank you so much for listening to an old man of 110. And if you have reached the end, I'll ask the spirits of our ancestors to bless you abundantly. If you're a girl, they give you a good boyfriend. If you're a boy, they give you a very good girlfriend. Thank you.
And if you want anything more, if you want a part 2 with Grandpa, Mr. Andrew Mwenda, please let us know in the comment section. Anything you want us to have spoken about in this video, we can always do a part 2. I think people are going to request for a part 2, definitely.
We hope so.
So feel free to hit the subscribe button and the like button. Please share this video because I know this is a very hot topic that people have been wanting to know about. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.